All right, so today's video is about getting out there and learning to foil. It's the summer. Here in the summer, we have lighter winds. Now's the time to learn to foil so that at least you can be out on the water while everyone else is sitting on shore. For me, it was a lot harder to learn to foil than it was to learn to twin tip. In fact, it took twice as long. I gathered up all of those mistakes, all of the pain, and today I'm going to talk about how you can get up and riding, and I think you can do it in under 20 hours. So for me, it took me 30 hours to learn to twin tip. It took me 40 hours to learn to foil. I'm gonna take all my tips, all my mistakes, watch the rest of the video, and I think this is gonna help you get that under 20 hours. Cool, so first let's start with some foundational skills. I think a couple of key foundational skills will translate over from twin tipping. First, knowing how to stay upwind. Staying upwind is about speed control, learning how to generate speed by sheeting in, learning how to generate speed from signing your kite up and down, learning how to generate speed by edging and releasing. Those are some foundational skills that will translate well to foiling. Next, riding twin tip. To transition on a foil, you're gonna have to do heel side to toe side, and so having some experience riding toe side will set you up well. After that, a down loop water start. Something that helps you in lighter wind, that's gonna translate really well. And down loop transitions, pulling a down loop, carving from heel side to toe side or toe side to heel side. These are things that are gonna really set you up well. Let's talk about my timeline. Here's my kite timeline. It took me about 30 hours over 2 years. Here it breaks down into the different sections. And then in comparison, here's my foil timeline. 40 hours over 2 years. Frankly, the foiling one was more painful. The falls from up on the foil, they just kind of rattle your brain more. And here's a timeline, an ideal timeline that I think someone can hit. In particular, if they group all of their sessions closer together, they have the right gear, they follow these building blocks for picking up these skills. Great, let's talk about the gear. I think the gear matters more in foiling than it matters for twin tipping, especially in the last couple years. Most gear is just good enough to learn twin tipping. Let's talk about the order in which it matters. The number one thing is the front foil wing that you have. You want one that's stable, so lateral stability side to side. You want one that has predictable rising up and rising down out of the water. I rode a race wing at the beginning and I was porpoising and I was getting bucked around like I was on a Bronco. You also want one that's big enough. I'm a heavier guy, I'm 220 pounds. I need to be more on like a 1,300 square centimeter or even a 1,500 square centimeter foil, especially when I'm learning to get riding. I think this would have cut my time in half alone. And obviously, if you're lighter, you're gonna want something on the extreme end. Next, the board. You want a big board to start. This is gonna make water starts easier. You want a big board to start. If you come off the foil and hit the water, it's gonna help you kind of bounce and keep going rather than wipe out, so it's gonna be more forgiving. And you want one that doesn't have a ton of volume because you want that board to sink into the water. It'll make it easier for you to get your feet up there for your water starts. Last but not least is the kite itself. You don't want a super heavy 5-strut big air kite. That's what I learned on. Those will fall out of the sky in lighter wind, which obviously makes it challenging. They also don't drift very well. And so what drifting is when you're doing a carving turn and you're riding towards your kite, you want your kite to back up. You want it to drift backwards with you rather than fall out of the sky. So having a lighter kite, maybe a 3-strut kite, or having a dedicated 1-strut or foil kite, it's gonna make a huge difference. I'm only gonna spend a few seconds on it, but I do wanna talk theory. In particular, I wanna talk where twin tipping and kite foiling are opposite. You're gonna have to forget a lot of what you learned for twin tipping. So first and foremost, edging. So much of twin tipping comes down to edging enough, not edging enough, and you spend a lot of time leaning back. It's gonna be the complete opposite, at least when you're starting, when you're learning to foil. Foiling is gonna be much more vertical. That foil is under the board. As soon as it starts moving, it wants to come up. If you're not stacked, if you're not vertical over top of it and leaning forward, you're not gonna keep that foil exactly where you want it to be. So twin tipping is leaning, kite foiling is gonna be a lot more vertical, at least at first. Next, riding upwind. So everyone in twin tipping, when they're starting out, they're just trying to get up and learn how to ride upwind. On foiling, yet again, it's the exact opposite. It's super easy. In fact, you go faster if you go upwind. And so just another key difference there. Last but not least, where you're gonna keep your kite. When you're kiting, when you're twin tipping, often you're trying to get that kite lower, you're signing that kite, you're trying to generate power to help you get upwind, and you're trying to avoid just keeping it at 12 o'clock above you. When you're learning to kite foil, you end up spending a lot more time with that kite at 12 o'clock. It generates less power, it's a bit more predictable, it helps keep you up out of the water, and so keep in mind, you're gonna be having that kite vertical more than you're used to. Let's get into the curriculum. These are the basic building blocks, and I think if you learn in this order, it's gonna make things a lot faster. First and foremost, train without the kite. So this is train with the foil without the kite. I think you do this through a jet ski or through a boat, even if you had like a rope tow. You could even do this with an e-foil, but I think it's best to be riding the actual foil that you're gonna be kiting on. And here, what you're gonna wanna do is learn the water start, get comfortable taxiing, understand how the foil moves, how the board moves when there's a foil underneath it, and also get your first rides. Come up out of the water, come back down and land, taxi, get a feel for turning. It's just really nice to be able to do this without having to think about or worry about the kite. Next, you want to learn how to carry the foil. This thing is unwieldy. You're going to want to carry it under your arm with the foil out to the side away from you. That's kind of the first position, or you're going to want to put the foil over your shoulder with the board down below. Those are the two ways I like to get from the car to the water. Once you're in the water, you also need to practice those skills too. You want to keep that foil away from you. So typically board is going to be closest to you, foil away from you. The whole setup is going to be on your side. And here, the most practical thing I've figured out is just the L grip. So hand is gonna grip the top of the board, elbow is gonna put pressure against the bottom of the board. That way everything stays vertical. And then you're gonna be able to fly the kite with the other hand and vice versa, and you can body drag doing this too. And the nice thing is it just keeps that foil away from you. Ultimately, if you spend a bunch of time with the foil straight down underneath the water, you're gonna kick it, you're gonna hit your feet, and it's really gonna hurt. So learn foil management just in walking out to the beach and in body dragging out to the water. All right, now let's put the kite in the equation. Let's think about water starts. The first thing you need to know is you want to learn to water start with more wind than you would expect. You don't want to go out the first time in super light winds. I recommend something like 16 to 18 miles an hour. Obviously, you can go a little higher than this if you're riding a smaller kite, but you want power. You don't want to have to be struggling to generate power while you're figuring out the foil. After that, I have two tips. One, get compressed. And so keep that board and your knees up high against your chest. And number two is roll up to get vertical. And so when you do the water start, you pick up bad habits in twin tipping. Sometimes if there's a lot of power, you just immediately water start and edge back and lean back against it. This is gonna throw you off when you're learning to foil. Stay compressed, roll up first, get vertical, and then stand up. That's what clicked for me and made everything easier. Next tip is taxi, 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 taxi. Don't go straight to flying on the foil. Taxiing means riding with your board on the water, the foil underneath. And the main reason you want to do this is you just want to feel how all of the mechanics of driving and steering the board are different when you have a 70, 80, 90 centimeter mast and a foil down below. The other thing you want to start doing is get comfortable leaning onto that front foot. So much of foiling is about keeping your weight forward in order to keep that foil under control. As soon as the foil gets speed, it wants to come up out of the water. Forward front weight on that front foot, that's what's going to keep it down, and you can learn those skills while taxiing. All right, now let's get into our first flights. Flying, it's all about speed, and there are three ways to generate speed. First, sheeting your bar in, getting power, you'll gain some speed, you'll come up out of the water, sheet out, you should come back down. Get comfortable with that. Second way of generating speed, you start to edge slowly upwind, and that will create more speed, and that is something you can use to get up out of the water as well. Third way of generating speed is actually pumping the foil with your legs, putting power down through the foil and using that to kind of pop up out of the water. Practice all three, get comfortable with each of those, figure out which one works for you. This was something huge. I didn't quite understand how and why it was working. Once it got broken down into these components, it started to click. All right, once you learn how to fly, you also need to learn how to stop. And oddly, that's trickier than you would expect when it comes to foiling. First thing you want to know about stopping, push out the bar, slowly bring the kite to 12 o'clock. That's going to slow you down. The next thing you can do, or the next technique you can use for slowing down, is to go downwind towards the kite. Don't do it super aggressively, but slowly, and you can kind of use that to burn off some speed. The last one, and this is the trickiest one because it's kind of counterintuitive for twin tippers, is edging upwind. The reason it's counterintuitive is when you edge upwind on a foil, you'll actually build speed first. Whereas on a twin tip, you're edging with your board and you can often slow down right away. You can do it on a foil. Remember, you'll speed up first, and then if you just kind of keep edging much further than you would think you need to, you'll eventually start to slow down. So this is the more advanced tip. All right, last but not least, the most important step of the entire thing, transitions. I recommend forgetting foot switches, skipping everything, go straight for a carving transition or a jibe. And so heel side to toe side to heel side. And here's my tips for getting that quickly. First and foremost, it's all about the kite movement, and it's about delicate kite movement. So push up the bar. The kite is gonna move first before everything else. So push out the bar, start moving the kite slowly up to 12 o'clock. Your board will eventually follow. The reason you want delicate, slow, deliberate kite movement is if you go too fast, you'll get ripped right off that foil and you'll end up wiping out a bunch of times like I did. After that, the next tip is front foot pressure, way more than you even think you would. You got used to doing it for water starting and riding on the foil. When you do a transition, you're gonna need a little bit more than you expect, so get ready for it. Last tip, stay vertical and think about this as more of a pivot and less of a big leaning carve. And so this is the thing that connected it all for me. A foil can kind of pivot around its center. You can stay a lot more vertical than you would expect rather than leaning. And so if you move that kite slowly, you start to put that front foot pressure and stay a lot more vertical stacked over that foil than you would expect. You're gonna connect the dots, you're gonna learn to get that transition quicker. Eventually you can progress into these huge, super banked, sweeping, fast carving turns. That's a progression skill. But here we just wanna be able to transition so we can go heel side to toe side, we can be an independent rider, and we can get out and we can go foil wherever we want, and we can start picking up all of those advanced foil skills later. So there you have it. Those are all my tips. Those are gonna get you out faster on the water. It's summertime. There's no better time to learn to foil than now when the wind is light. That way you can get out on the water while your buddies are sitting on the couch. Hopefully that was useful. If I made any major mistakes, call me out, call me an idiot, put it in the comments down below. If it was useful, give it a thumbs up, and thanks for watching.